So, before we begin, a note for the listeners. This episode contains a brief, candid discussion of public transit harassment and sexual assault. We value our community's well-being and recognize that these topics can be deeply triggering. If you're not in the right headspace to hear this today, please feel free to skip this episode or come back to it when you're ready. Take care of yourself. Hi, I'm Andrea Claire. If I'm not laughing, I'm definitely crying. Here is a look at the messy, ridiculous reality of my life. I've noticed in the last couple of episodes an undercurrent that has suddenly raised its hand, and that is how we women were raised to be polite. But polite for a reason. Politeness for self-preservation. Politeness for social control. Generally, I feel the reason given to us has been for our emotional and physical safety. Thanks, guys. So if that's the case, then why do so many of us live with emotional and maybe physical scars? Politeness seems to have just paved the way for being taken advantage of. From childhood, girls were and probably still are taught to engage in collaborative, relationship-focused play, which prioritizes consensus building. Boys were, and probably still are, encouraged to engage in competitive play, which rewards dominance and boundary pushing. The boys will be boys mentality, which has proven to be problematic, giving excuses to bad behavior. When men are direct, they are perceived as a leader. When women are direct, we are labeled as aggressive, abrasive, or difficult. We're just a bunch of bitches. As women, we are taught soft language and politeness as a defense mechanism. Things like, I just think, or sorry to bother you, or simply, I'm sorry. We de-escalate potential male fragility or aggression, trading our authentic voice for our physical and emotional safety. Unfortunately, I have many way too perfect examples of this that I have experienced. Why was I never taught that when a man rubs himself on me on public transit to yell? Instead, my reaction was, oh, I'm sorry. Like it was my fault that my body got in the way of his penis. Well, he kept it in his pants, but there was clearly an itch that he was trying to scratch. Someone was complaining on threads about men on planes and how she didn't care about crying babies, but men were problematic. Oh my God, yes. We lived in Singapore for 15 years and flew a lot. The complaints about babies on planes, honestly, when I see them, I assume those complaining simply don't fly often. Maybe they fly once a year and happen to have a baby crying on a plane, but also fuck off. That's their literal way of communicating. If you're that sensitive, buy yourself noise-canceling headphones. But men on a plane? Let's unpack that. I was flying with my youngest, who was a baby at the time, and we were in economy by the window. She wanted comfort and food. Well, I put her on my boob, covered up with a blanket, and was just staring out the window. The man beside me started talking. Me, because I'm fucking polite, to start replying. I was on a flight to Austin, Texas. We lived there for a year. Anyway, the vibes he was giving were questionable, and my gut was screaming, take shelter, take shelter. He was asking about Austin and wanting recommendations. Asked about my favorite restaurant. And then asked, what am I doing Saturday night? What? I awkwardly say, well, let me check with my husband to see our plans. I know, fucking dumb. But I literally am trapped on a plane with this fucking snake. He says, your husband isn't invited. Ew. Ugh. Like, what? I can't get out of my head that this sicko must have had some sort of nursing fetish. For fuck's sakes, just reliving the story makes me want to go and shower myself with bleach for simply being in some stranger's thoughts that way. I told this story years later to a flight attendant who said, next time, buzz to be moved. We will move you. Also, let me just say, I am certainly not fetish shaming, but this was, I feel, understandably a bit ick for me. I was walking down Dundas West in Toronto years ago with my middle daughter in a stroller and my eldest, who was about 4 at the time, walking beside me as a truck full of men drove past, yelling, nice tits. I remember my eldest asking what they said. Fucking men. In that same single mother era, I woke up one morning with my jaw locked open. It was so fucking painful. I went to the walk-in clinic at Dundas and Bloor. The male doctor asked me if I had been engaging in giving multiple blowjobs. Horrified. Like, absolutely fucking horrified. I reported him to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and he rebutted my complaint with, well, he practices in an area where he sees a lot of prostitutes. Like, what? Also, sex workers, my dude. But you know what's fucked? Having that be polite and don't make a scene mentality. Is that just me? Are you listening and thinking, fuck Andrea, what the hell is wrong with you? Or are you thinking, I'd give advice to a friend to move or yell, but I'd be frozen in the black hole of politeness too? While living abroad, I have to say I felt safer in Singapore. So often people have said to me, how was it living with all those laws though? My answer was always, I haven't chosen a life of crime, so honestly, I'm okay. Most countries, it is illegal to urinate in public. It's enforced in Singapore. It's not enforced here in Toronto because people get their day in court to justify whipping out their dicks. And yes, it's always men because women don't pee in public. Although I felt close to it being a woman in midlife with a pelvic floor that is failing me, just like all of our fucking systems. Singapore also had no jaywalking, which here is just not really enforced. Sure, they have harsh drug laws. I don't do drugs, no spitting in public. Okay, but spitting is disgusting. Also, you are literally spreading germs and bacteria. I think being gross should just be against the law. I digress. I would dive into more examples, but then honestly, this should come with a stronger trigger warning. But aren't all of us women triggered daily from our personal history, some situation or another? How many of us have been taught that we are the problem? What encouraging behavior were we doing at the moment? What were we wearing? Well, in one instance, I was wearing jeans. The other, a fucking baby. I guess two types of jeans if you really think about it. We should be taught to use our regular voices. Instead, we are taught sign language to ask for help or to simply ask for Angela at the checkout. Keep quiet. Don't draw attention. Be sweet. But it's not just about assault. As women, we all have unfortunately experienced some sort of injustice where we should be taught that it's okay to speak loudly. When an entire demographic is conditioned to believe that ruffling feathers is the ultimate social sin, they become much less likely to challenge systemic inequalities, demand equal pay, or disrupt institutions that do not serve them. When women use identical assertive strategies as men, they are frequently perceived as demanding, unlikable, or not team players. So often in corporate structures, women are coached or naturally learn to soften their approach when they're asking for raises or promotions. They remain aware of who might deserve that raise or promotion to keep the peace and preserve working relationships. Researchers call this the double bind or the backlash effect. Women get passed over from having children or from caring for elderly family members. Well, think about that the next time you go to ask for a cute promotion, little missy. The fucked up thing about that is those who have taken some time having a baby or caring for someone else, well, we are natural nurturers and multitask with ease. We can fold laundry, call a plumber, get groceries, cook a meal, and vacuum, all while another human is attached to us. Okay, so to be honest, I do use a robot vacuum now. And then there's men. Hey, honey, do we have any mustard? They call out as they're standing directly in front of the fridge, door open, staring with their man eyes, confused at the wonder of this cold closet. As we are in a completely different part of the house, we already visualize that yellow edge of a jar teasing from behind the milk jug. Honestly, when you think about it, it makes sense that executive assistants are mostly women. This mentality also happens in the arts. Men tell us what our voices should say. And we may not listen, but we definitely smile and nod. Or reply softly, careful not to inspire conversations. I'll still never forget the men who volunteered their feedback about how my voice for my podcast should reflect some man who has this really cool sports podcast, and maybe I wanted to listen to be inspired. I said a soft thank you I mean, honestly, they were trying to be helpful. Definitely no ill will there. But it was hilarious that a male dominated sports pod was a suggested voice I listened to and inspire from for the Fuck You 50s, a podcast on women's authenticity in midlife who's tired of the bullshit. I am not anti men, but I am pro women. There was a midlife podcast from the UK I listened to during the pandemic. It was great. Two female hosts interviewing guests and experts. Both had a journalism background. The first handful of episodes had guests who were expert women of a certain age. Then they brought on a male doctor. I immediately was hard fucking pass. Sure, he clearly knew his shit, but as I was listening, I just felt frustrated. Like, what the fuck? They couldn't get a woman doctor to discuss hormones? Then he touched on the fact that his daughter followed in his footsteps, practicing the same medicine, and how proud he was that she too was an expert in that field. So why wasn't his daughter on? If not instead of, at least with him. I took the podcast off my playlist. Maybe these midlife women are just so used to the patriarchy, they thought a man's voice was needed. I've had men pitch to be a guest on my podcast, and I'm not saying they wouldn't be good. However, there's enough mansplaining out there. They don't need my platform. You know the drill. A soft, polite no thank you, a smiling through the discomfort when a hard, emphatic no is what's actually required. Because God forbid you ruffle a single feather or draw attention to yourself. That would be embarrassing. But let's look at the math here. Embarrassing for whom exactly? We grew up being told, go with the flow, just be sweet. Translation, shrink yourself down so everyone else has room to stretch out. Well, the boat is officially rocking, and honestly, I'm bringing the waves. Parents of daughters, it's way past the time to teach them that it's okay to tell someone to go fuck themselves with a voice more audible than a whisper. I've had my kids tell me things over the years where I've told them just that. Tell the person to go fuck themselves. My daughter's response is, Mom, no, we can't say that. That's rude. Well, my kids grew up with me. So one, they learned the art of sarcasm. And two, yes, you can actually fucking say that. If you're standing up for yourself and that other person takes that as you being rude, then that is a them problem. Okay, maybe not storm into HR with that demand after being passed over for a job. You still want to keep the current one. So if you're someone who is not a woman in midlife and you're looking in from your outside glass house perspective, wondering why we are all more vocal and seemingly angry, well, we are Gen X and tired of all the fucking bullshit that we will no longer be tolerating. I'm done apologizing for taking up space, as we all should be. Thanks for tuning in to the Fuck You 50s. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow and rate the podcast. And we would love to connect with you on Instagram. So be sure to follow us at the Fuck You 50s. The Fuck You 50s is hosted by Andrea Claire. See you next time.